In today's video, we'll look at 3 disturbing, unsolved disappearances. But before we get started, we have a message from our amazing sponsor, Magellan TV. Magellan TV has a lot of great documentaries. A fascinating one that I watched the other night was The War on Witches. It's about the 16th century persecution of people in Europe, mostly women, who were accused of being witches. It got to be so bad that it's estimated that around 40,000 people were slaughtered. The War on Witches is just one of the many fascinating documentaries about the darkest times in history that are available on Magellan TV. Magellan TV documentaries are ad-free and many are available in 4K. Magellan TV is run by filmmakers and new documentaries are being added all the time, so there's always something to watch. Magellan TV can be watched anywhere at any time on your TV, laptop, or mobile device. It works with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Google Play, and iOS, and you can even cast from your phone to your TV. Magellan TV has a special offer for criminally listed viewers. Just go to try.magellantv.com/criminally-listed and you'll get a month for free. So please help support Criminally Listed and find something great to watch by checking out Magellan TV. Number 3. Randal Gary. In the spring of 2003, Randal Gary was 50 years old and he lived in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. He had been divorced for many years and he had a 26-year-old daughter. For years, Gary worked in the restaurant industry. In his late 40s, he wanted a more meaningful job, so he trained to become a psychotherapist. In the spring of 2003, he established a practice called Quick Fix in Toronto. The business was off to a slow start, but Gary wasn't feeling pessimistic. On May 7, 2003, he purchased 100 advertising spots on a Toronto radio station. 2 days later, on Friday, May 9, 2003, Gary flew across the country to Vancouver, British Columbia. There, he boarded the Holland America cruise ship, the Avon. Gary had planned to take an Alaskan cruise before getting heavily involved in pushing his new business. He also mentioned to a friend that he hoped to meet a woman on the ship. Several people on the ship remembered Randal Gary. He told some people it had been a lifelong dream to take a trip to Alaska. But what was odd was that when the ship docked in Juneau and Skagway, Alaska, he didn't get off the boat. He only disembarked at one port. That was in Ketchikan, Alaska. However, he did not do any sightseeing. Instead, he just bought 13 postcards and mailed them to friends and family. Most of the postcards simply read, "Love Randy." Later that same day in Ketchikan, Gary got off the ship again at 6:19 p.m. He got back onto the ship just 9 minutes later. It's not known why he got off the ship and what he did in those 9 minutes. After the stop at Ketchikan, which was on Friday, May 16th, the boat headed back to Vancouver. Saturday was a day at sea, and then the boat was scheduled to arrive in Vancouver on the morning of Sunday, May 18th. During Gary's trip, he spent most of his evenings in the boat's casino. He often slept in. Something else that was odd was that Gary tried to keep the crew out of his cabin. He always kept his "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door. One time he got the steward in his room and he sternly told him to get out. Gary's attempts to keep the steward out of his room became such a big problem that the steward complained to his supervisor because he couldn't do his job. On the evening that they departed from Ketchikan, Gary ate dinner and they went to the casino. On the morning of Sunday, May 18th, Gary was supposed to disembark in Vancouver because it was the end of the 7-day cruise. Before he was to leave the ship, he was supposed to settle his bill for $127. But he never made his way to the customer service desk. A crew member went to his room and found the Do Not Disturb sign hanging on the doorknob as it had been all week. The crew member got inside. It looked like someone had laid down on the bed, but it appeared it had not been slept in. The room did not have a balcony, there was just a sealed window. All of Randal Gary's possessions were in the room. This included his passport, his credit card, his cash, his driver's license, and even the key card to his room. Gary had diabetes, and his insulin was in the room, as was his blood sugar log. The last entry in the log was made on Thursday. There was also a box of Viagra, and one pill was missing. It also appeared that someone had been drinking in the room. There was an empty bottle of expensive champagne, a half-empty bottle of red wine, and a partially drank bottle of rye. However, there were no drinking glasses in the cabin. A search of the ship was conducted, but no other trace of Randal Gary was found. He has never been found dead or alive. There are several theories about what happened to Randal Gary. The first is that he died by suicide by jumping off the ship. But his friends and family do not believe that this is what happened. No one thought he was suicidal, and he did not have a history of mental illness. He was also looking forward to running his new business. Also, if he did want to die by suicide, he could have overdosed on his insulin, which would have been relatively painless as opposed to jumping into the frigid Pacific Ocean. Another theory is that Gary accidentally fell overboard. For example, he could have become disoriented because of his diabetes and he went over the railing. Or he could have been too drunk from the alcohol and he went overboard. But his family said he was always careful with his diabetes. An investigator said that he inspected the ship's rails and they were designed to be exceedingly difficult for someone to go overboard. Gary's family also don't think it was him who drank the alcohol. Since he was a diabetic, he didn't drink much. His family also said that he hated champagne and he would not have drunk it. He was also allergic to rye, so they know he didn't drink that. The investigators do not know with certainty if Gary went missing on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. They thought that he likely went missing on the Friday night after he went to the casino. But 3 people said that they saw him on Saturday. One woman said she talked to him while they were waiting for an elevator. Another person said that they saw him talking to a blonde woman at the afternoon tea. Then, later that night, an elderly man saw Gary outside of his cabin. It appeared that 2 women were leaving the room. Gary had his arm around one of the women. She was described as being in her 30s and she had shoulder-length blonde hair. The women have never been identified. The investigators are not sure if the witness accounts are reliable. They said that people tend to lose track of days when they are on a cruise and that these encounters could have happened on Friday. On Saturday evening, the steward did enter Gary's room. He did a quick cleanup and then he got out of the cabin. This could explain why no drinking glasses were found in his room. But if the steward did a cleanup of the room, why did he not take the empty bottle of champagne? It's also possible that the alcohol was drunk after the steward got into the room on Saturday. If Gary did not drink the alcohol, whoever was drinking it may have taken their glass or glasses with them. Randal Gary's family was upset by the response from Holland America and the Vancouver police. Holland America did not save the surveillance footage of Gary in the casino on Friday night. The police concluded that Gary wasn't a victim of foul play, so they didn't dust the cabin for fingerprints. No one took a single photograph of Gary's cabin after he went missing. Gary's family does not agree with the police, and they think he may have been a victim of foul play. They think that at least one person on the ship knows what happened to him. Another theory is that Randal Gary is still alive and he chose to disappear. Gary had talked to a friend about his fantasy of leaving his life behind and starting all over again. After Gary went missing, his family found out something unusual about him. In 2001, he won $150,000 in the lottery, and he kept it secret from everyone, even his daughter. The lead investigator on the case said that there is one aspect of the disappearance that he couldn't stop thinking about. That was the 9-minute trip off the boat in Ketchikan. The ship was set to depart shortly before he got off the boat. 9 minutes wasn't much time to do anything on the port. However, there was a payphone that he could have used. Did he use the 9 minutes to run down to the payphone and call someone? If he did, who did he call? Did his trip off the boat have anything to do with his disappearance? The detective thinks if he did make a phone call, the call was important enough that he would risk missing the last leg of his trip. There is speculation that if Randal Gary did get off the boat alive, he might have gone to Arizona. He mentioned to several people he had the desire to move there. Also, he made several trips to Arizona around the same time he won the lottery. It's been over 17 years since Randal Gary went missing. If he did get off the boat alive, he's never been in contact with his family, not even his daughter. If Gary is still alive, at the time of this video, he would be 67 years old. He is 6 feet tall and he weighed around 200 pounds. He had brown hair and brown eyes. Nearly 2 decades later, Randal Gary's family is still hoping for closure on his case. Number 2. Randy Leach. Randy Wayne Leach was born on July 25, 1970. He was the only child of Harold and Alberta Leach. When Randy was 5 years old, his family moved onto a farm on the outskirts of Linwood, Kansas. Randy loved living on the farm and he raised pigs. In the spring of 1988, Randy was 17 years old. He was a large young man, standing at 6'2". That spring, he was restoring a 1969 Ford Mustang. When he was done, he wanted to paint it cherry red. In the summer of 1988, Randy was going to generate income by mowing lawns. His parents bought him a riding lawnmower as a high school graduation present. In the fall, he was planning on attending a trade school. On April 15, 1988, Randy was 3 weeks away from graduating high school. That day, he mowed some lawns. That evening, one of his friends, who lived on a farm about 5 miles from his own farm, was having a pre-graduation party. After mowing the lawns, Randy went to a nearby convenience store where he bought some candy and soda. He also put $3 worth of gas into the car he was driving, which was his mother's gray 4-door 1985 Dodge 500 sedan. He then drove to a body shop in DeSoto, Kansas to check on the Mustang he was working on. He then drove to the party. It's not exactly clear when he arrived at the party, but it's believed he got there sometime between 9:30 and 10 p.m. There were about 75 to 150 people at the party. A lot of the people were drinking, and some of them were using drugs. It's not clear if Randy was drinking or doing drugs at the party, but the mother of the person hosting the party said that she saw Randy and it looked like he was having trouble walking. However, she noted he didn't have a drink in his hand and he didn't appear to be drunk. Also, No one remembered Randy drinking that evening. At around 1:30 a.m., one of Randy's friends was going to drive him home, but Randy couldn't find his keys. So the friend promised to return to drive Randy home, and then he drove someone else home first. At 2:05 a.m., the mother of the party host saw Randy lining up to use the washroom. Randy's friend returned around 2:30 a.m. Randy and the car he was driving were not there. No one saw Randy leave the party. The next morning, at around 6 a.m., Harold and Alberta Leach woke up and discovered that Randy had not come home. They went outside to see if the car was parked somewhere on their property. They saw a man who was an acquaintance of Randy driving slowly down their road. Later, when they thought about it, they realized it was very strange that he would be driving by their home so slowly. They also thought it was odd that he would be out driving that early in the morning. It turned out that the acquaintance was one of the last people to see Randy at the party. Harold and Alberta assumed that Randy had been in a car accident. They called around and learned that no accidents had been reported in the area. Alberta's brother was a police officer in nearby Lawrence, Kansas. She called him and asked him to go to the farm where the party was held. When he got there at around 7 a.m., he discovered that the party had been cleaned up. If there was any evidence as to what happened to Randy, it was gone. Randy's parents reported him missing after the 24-hour mandatory waiting period. Harold and Alberta were sure that he did not run away. He had money in his bank account, and it was untouched. Also, Randy was extremely excited at the prospect of finishing restoring his Mustang. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation agrees with his parents, and they do not think he left the area on his own volition. They think it's possible that he was a victim of foul play. There are several strange events surrounding Randy's disappearance. For example, not long after he disappeared, the house on the property where the party was held burned to the ground. This was not the only mysterious fire connected to Randy's disappearance. The car that Randy was driving on the night he went missing was never found, so Harold and Alberta replaced it with a Chrysler LeBaron. The car only had about 40,000 miles on it. Shortly after they bought the car, while it was parked in their backyard, it burst into flames. An investigator said that the fire was started because there was a rupture in the gas line. The Leaches think that the cause of the fire was arson. At the time of Randy's disappearance, he owned a German Shepherd named Crackers. He had the dog for about 4 years. 4 months after Randy vanished, Crackers went missing too. Like Randy, Crackers has never been found. Before Randy vanished, there were rumors that there was a satanic cult operating in Linwood. There were also rumors that some of his friends were Satanists. So there were rumors that Randy was killed by the cult. Several months after Randy disappeared, a man went to the police and told them a strange tale. He said that he had been abducted by a group of Satanists. They took him to a cave outside of Linwood. In the cave, they threatened to cut off his left arm. To prove they were serious, they showed him a dead body that was hanging in the cave. The police thought it could have been the body of Randy Leach. But they searched the caves and found nothing. They concluded that the man had hallucinated the experience because he was on drugs. In the years since Randy's disappearance, the entrance to the caves has been bulldozed. Then in March 1989, about 11 months after Randy disappeared, one of the partygoers got in contact with the police. The man led them to the banks of the Kansas River. He had found a dismembered foot in a tennis shoe on the banks of the river. The police searched the area for the rest of the body, but found nothing. They determined that the foot did not belong to Randy. It's not known who the foot belongs to or where it came from. What is notable is that the person who found the foot was one of the last people to see Randy at the party. He was also the person that his parents saw driving by their house early on the morning that they realized he was missing. In the ensuing years, the man has died. It was never determined if he had anything to do with Randy's disappearance. In 1993, a man going by the names Terry Martin and Lee Harper got in contact with the Leaches. He told them he was a research journalist and he offered to investigate Randy's disappearance. It had been 5 years since Randy went missing, and Harold and Alberta were desperate, so they accepted his offer. For several months, the man interviewed people who were at the party. He then brought all the information he collected to a detective with the sheriff's department. They pooled their information together. Based on that information, in August 1993, the detective arrested 3 men. One of the men was a suspected Satanist who was at the party on the night Randy vanished. But then the county attorney went over the information and he did not think that the evidence showed probable cause. So the 3 men were released within 24 hours of being arrested. No other arrests have been made in the case. The Leaches have complained that the Sheriff's Department and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation have not been forthcoming with information. In 2017, 29 years after Randy disappeared, they filed a lawsuit to make the records on the investigation into his disappearance public. The judge ended up ruling against them, and the files are still confidential. In 2018, Timothy Dennis, who was with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation and was the lead investigator on Randy's case from 2000 to 2010, spoke to the Kansas City Star. He dismissed the idea that Randy was killed by a satanic cult. He said that the speculation about Satanism was related to the satanic panic that was sweeping America in the 1980s. He thinks that Randy's disappearance was an accident. There were 2 routes between Randy's home and the farm where the party was held. One was a main highway and another was a back road. If Randy was intoxicated, he probably would have driven home on the back road to avoid being pulled over by the police. On that road, there was a single-lane bridge that went over a stream of water called Stranger Creek. There were no guardrails on the approach to the bridge. Timothy Dennis believes that Randy drove off the road and into the creek. He learned in the 10 years after Randy went missing, Stranger Creek was not searched. When it was searched, no trace of the car or Randy were found. However, Dennis believes that the car and the body were pushed downstream, or the car sunk in the sediment, making it impossible for searchers to find. The Leaches do not think that this is what happened. They said that the creek was not searched because the water was too low and it would have been evident that a car was in the water. In 2019, Harold and Alberta Leach asked the new governor of Kansas to appoint someone from out of state to lead a task force to investigate Randy's disappearance. The governor's office released a statement saying that the governor was sympathetic to the Leaches, but she did not have the legal authority to do something like that. It's been over 32 years since Randy Leach disappeared. Harold and Alberta Leach, who are now in their 70s, still hold out hope that they'll find out what happened to their only child. Number 1. Sarah Avon. July 21st, 1981 was an unusually cool summer night in Joliet, Illinois. Sarah Avon, who was 6.5 years old, was playing outside with her younger sister and other neighborhood children. Sarah was described as feisty, but less outgoing than her 5-year-old sister, Marie. Sarah's teacher thought she was hungry for attention. Sarah was involved in her church. She took swimming lessons, played soccer, and took ballet lessons. Sarah and her sister lived with their mother, Jane, and their stepfather, Francis. Jane and Francis owned and operated an auto body shop on the same street where they lived. At about 8:30 p.m., a neighbor came over for cake and coffee. Jane was about to call the girls in, but she remembered they wanted to stay out and catch fireflies. So she let them stay out and play. At 8:50, Jane called for Marie and Sarah to come inside. But only Marie came home. Marie was surprised that Sarah wasn't home because she hadn't seen her in a while. Sarah had gotten into an argument with another child and she stormed off. Neighbors heard that Sarah was missing and they began to search for her. At 9:10 p.m., Jane called the police and reported Sarah missing. 2 officers came to their house, but they didn't think it was a big deal. They thought that Sarah had just fallen asleep in a bush somewhere and she would come home at any time. At 11 p.m., a new sergeant came on duty. She called James and asked if Sarah had been found. James said that they hadn't found Sarah and she was frantic. The sergeant immediately sent more officers to the area and K-9 units were brought in. But they could not find any trace of 6-year-old Sarah Avon. No one had seen anything unusual in the neighborhood that evening. It appeared that Sarah simply vanished into thin air. Sarah's mother thought that her kidnapper was possibly someone who lived in the neighborhood. She thought that this explained why no one saw anything unusual. Also, Sarah might have been more likely to go somewhere with someone she knew. While it was a plausible explanation, it did not lead to the discovery of her whereabouts or the identity of the kidnapper. For years, the case sat cold. Then in early 1993, a man named Robert Today went to the police in Joliet with a strange story. Today told the police that his uncle, Ernest Wilson Sr., was on his deathbed in Arkansas. Because of his condition, he could not talk. But it appeared he had something he wanted to communicate. So they gave him a piece of paper and a writing utensil. He drew a triangle, and then he drew a circle inside the triangle. No one knew what it meant. But then Today remembered that his uncle and his cousins used to live in Joliet. They lived on Miller Ave, about 1.5 miles from Sarah's home. They moved out of state less than a year after Sarah went missing. Today told the police that his uncle had several children. He had 1 son and several daughters. His daughters would babysit Sarah. Sarah was at their home 2 days before she went missing. The Wilsons' family house in Joliet was on a triangular-shaped lot. Today said that later, Wilson's only son confided in him. He was 15 years old at the time of Sarah's disappearance. Today said that his cousin had a history of mental illness. Before his uncle's death, his cousin had spent 12 years in a psychiatric hospital in California. Today said that his cousin told him that he and another boy took Sarah back to his house. He admitted that he sexually molested Sarah in the basement of their house. He said that afterward, he went upstairs and she was still alive, and he said he didn't kill her. Today concluded that his cousin most likely kidnapped and killed Sarah, and then his uncle buried Sarah's body on the property to protect his son. He thought that the drawing was his uncle's form of a deathbed confession, and it indicated where Sarah's body was buried on the property on Miller Avenue. The police thought that Robert Today's story was interesting, even though they found holes in it. When Today approached them, the lot was vacant. There had been a fire 2 years earlier which destroyed the house, and then the basement was filled in. The police brought search dogs and special sonar equipment to the lot. They found nothing to indicate that a body had been buried on the lot. But they decided it was worth investigating, and they started excavating the lot. However, after several days of digging, they found nothing, and they gave up on searching. Several people were critical of the search. One government official who was involved in the search did not think a large enough area was excavated. Another person who was critical of the search was a man who lived in the neighborhood when Sarah went missing. He was a teenager at the time, and he knew the Wilson family. He had been a frequent guest in their home. He recalled that one night in 1981, which is the same year Sarah went missing, he was out on a late night walk and he saw Ernest Wilson Sr. doing something unusual. He was digging a large hole with a shovel. He was chest deep in the hole. He asked Wilson what he was doing. Wilson said he was digging a hole because he was planning on transplanting some sunflowers there. The man said that the incident happened so long ago that he didn't remember if he saw Wilson digging the hole around the time of Sarah's disappearance. The man also said that he went out another night and he saw Wilson doing some more strange yard work. He saw Wilson bulldozing some trees and piling dirt in a different area of their property. Later, the Wilsons' above-ground pool was moved to the area where he was doing the bulldozing. He thought that this was odd because the pool had been in a sunny spot and then it was moved into the shade. The man thought that Wilson might have moved Sarah's body from the original burial spot. The man noted one other odd thing about the Wilson home. For years in the basement, they had 2 aluminum coolers. One was branded with 7-Up logos and the other with Coca-Cola logos. At some point, he noticed that the 7-Up cooler was missing. However, once again, he couldn't remember when all this happened because it happened over a decade earlier. When the man found out that the Wilsons' former property was being excavated, he went to watch it. He did not think that the searchers were digging deep enough, so he told them about the strange nighttime yard work that Wilson had done. They told him to mind his own business and to go away. Nearly 40 years later, Sarah Avon has never been found dead or alive. If she is alive, she is 45 years old at the time of this video. Many people believe her body is in the 7-Up cooler, and the cooler is buried on the lot where the Wilsons used to live on Miller Avenue. If you just watched this video, you're probably interested in true crime. Sadly, true crime has a hidden cost, and that is real people have lost their lives, and in some cases, perpetrators escape justice. But you can help make a difference. If you join Magellan TV in July, Magellan TV will donate $10 to the Cold Case Foundation. The Cold Case Foundation raises awareness about cold cases, and they provide resources to law enforcement agencies who are investigating cold cases. So please help support this great foundation and get access to thousands of documentaries in the process by checking out Magellan TV. Just click on the link in the description box below this video. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you're looking for something new to watch, why not check out my new channel, Chapter Dark. Every week we have a new mystery for you to solve. In this week's video, you are trying to solve the mysterious disappearance of a young woman. Is it somehow connected to a serial killer known as the Closet Monster? You can find a link to Chapter Dark in the description box below this video. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.